Welcome to IMAGI-NATION TV. We are in week 13. This is episode 61 featuring keynote speaker with the theme of change. My name is Kalani Ripley and I'm from Miami State High School and I am in year 12. Now, the theme change means to me is to be able to adapt and to improve upon what's already is so perfect and to be able to change things that come our way and be able to change what we do. It's really quite amazing, and it's something that I think as a school captain, as the first Indigenous school captain at my school, I think that's something that has really brought a lot of change, and being a leader is something that I've really enjoyed. So I'm going to pass on to our co-host Steph today. Steph, are you there?
I certainly am, and yes, guys, you heard it right. We are giving away the stage every day, and today we've decided Kaylani is going to be the host, and I've been demoted to co-host, and I couldn't be happier about it. A little reflection from yesterday. We met with our designers to talk about change, and Dr. Janine Mohammed from the Lowacha Institute enlightened us on the difference between cultural awareness and cultural safety, and her life work that's been involved with designing systems to support that in the medical industry for Indigenous people here in Australia. She also provided some great advice on how to work as a change maker when coming up against people who don't necessarily believe in your cause. And she said just acknowledging that there will always be a proportion of people that will never change, and accepting that fact will be really beneficial for you. She also said that taking moments of opportunity to have conversations can lead to change, even if it doesn't appear to do so in those moments. And it's also important to gather your allies so you can do the work together. So ahead, as Kaylani mentioned, we have our keynote speaker, and Soreti Kadir is joining us. And I encourage any of the people tuning in live today, please drop your questions in the chat line, and your host, Kaylani, will be reading them out after she delivers her speech. So back to you, Kaylani. I've just got one question for you. Thanks for the insight on change as well, and congratulations on being the first Indigenous school captain at Miami State High. And this question might require a little bit of imagination. I think you've got that in bucket loads, so let's see where this takes us. If there was one gift that you could give everybody in the world, but it had to be the same gift, what would that be and why?
I think the gift of being able to learn and be adaptable. Everybody can learn and everybody can inspire change, but people have different abilities to be able to learn at different rates. And if somebody could harness all the smartest people in the world in different ways they learn and things like that, it would change the world. If everybody was on an equal platform and they learned the same, it'd be truly amazing. And I think that's personally the gift I'd love to give to everyone.
Beautiful, thanks for that. We're going to go over and introduce our co-host today, Soreti Kadir. How are you? Thanks for joining us on IMAGI-NATION TV.
Hey, I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here. I've been excited since we started having the conversation about coming on.
Excellent. So we've got some questions that are going to be coming through from the chat line, and Kaylani and I will also be listening intently to ask you a few once you deliver your presentation. So the floor is all yours for the next 20 minutes to inspire us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Thank you so much, Kelani. Okay. Yeah, first of all, I just want to say thank you for everyone that's tuning in, and thank you to AIM for the platform. This is the first like Zoom engagement, talk or performance, whatever that I've done since we've gone into COVID. So I just want to say that it's a little bit strange to not be seeing physical faces and feeling physical energy while speaking, but I'm just going to imagine that you guys are in this room with me. And actually hearing from Kehlani and Stephanie, and actually I can feel your energy even through the computer and just your presence. So that's helping. I will begin by paying my respects to the traditional owners of the land that we're on. I'm currently on the lands of the Kulin Nations, the Wurundjeri and the Bunurong people, and acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded, and that pay my respects to ancestors past, present, and emerging. And I also want to pay respects to my own land of ancestors, who are certainly a part of the voice that I use to communicate with you today and that I use every day. So going into today's theme, after being invited to do this talk, the crew at AIM asked us to fill out a very short form. And it was in doing this that the theme of this talk was introduced to me. Maybe they had mentioned it before that and I had missed the memo, but I remember seeing in the drop-down box, week 13, change. And while we were talking about coming on and I was preparing for the talk, the protests in Minnesota over the murder of George Floyd were taking place. And I personally wasn't doing much else in that first 2 weeks than trying to keep informed about what was happening in regards to this movement. And at that point, I didn't know exactly what I was going to talk about, but I did think to myself that to have an audience of young people in this moment with the opportunity to talk about change is no small feat. So I want to begin by saying that I understand change as a natural, necessary, and consistent process. You may have even heard the saying that the only constant in life is change, or there is nothing that is constant except for change. And I think that what allows change to take its natural course when we think about it in the sense of the change that our world needs is and I mean you and I, understanding that we have a responsibility to bear witness to the world for what it really is. I want to repeat that just so that it's not lost in translation. We have a responsibility to bear witness to this world for what it really is. So what does it mean to bear witness or to give our witness? I understand it as meaning that we never completely look away from what is going on in our world, no matter how overwhelming it may be, no matter how angry it may make us, no matter how sad it may make us or helpless it may make us. To bear witness to our world is to protect our hearts from desensitization, to protect our hearts from becoming disconnected from the experiences that others are having in our world. Now, this doesn't mean that we never take breaks from consuming mass amounts of information, which I think in our day and age is actually an important thing to safeguarding our ability to properly engage with the world. But I think it means that we do that. We take breaks from consuming information, but only with the intent to return our witness to the reality of this world with more openness and with more sincerity. And I think bearing witness to the world actually goes beyond just consuming news, but it is paying attention to the experiences that people are having in their lives on a day-to-day basis in terms of what you see outside of just computer screen or a phone screen. So what does it mean to bear witness to this world, but to bear witness to it for what it really is? Like, what's the difference? I think it means that we all have to recognize that we have work to do in connecting ourselves with what is real. We live in an era, as I just said, of information overload, and figuring out what information will show you the world for what it really is not easy, and there isn't a set template for how to do this. But for me, there are two general principles that I find work. One is that we as people know the world best through people. And so we must make an effort to hear the world through the stories of people. And two, we must make an effort to understand our local and our regional and our global history. This act of giving our witness to the world for what it really is, with emphasis on understanding this reality through people and their stories, supported by the context of history, I think leads us to naturally ask ourselves, what does all of this really mean? And this is a personal inquiry. I think it's a personal question. It means that you have watched for long enough, or you've given your witness to the world well enough, that the things that you've witnessed and the way that you've witnessed is beginning to change the very foundation of who you are. This question of what does this really mean allows the stories that this witness has made you aware of to enter your heart. And this brings me to, I think you guys can see the quotes or the black screen with some writing on it, right? Okay, cool. So because this brings me to the last line of the first quote that you see there, where it says, if you cannot do this, then you change it with your heart. When you keep this question with yourself long enough, this question of what does all of this mean? What does all of the things that I have seen and I've heard and I've learned, what does it mean to me? It starts to transform the way that your heart sees the world. And again, naturally, this leads you to desiring the second part of this quote. Actually, sorry, it is a second part, but I'm going up like this, okay? So it leads you to asking yourself naturally and desiring the second part of this quote, where it says that if you cannot change it with your actions, then you change it with your tongue, meaning you begin to speak. And when you speak long enough, I think your heart, at least this has been the case for myself, your heart, to protect itself against hypocrisy, being one who speaks and doesn't follow with action, will lead you to changing injustice with your actions or with your hands, which is the first part of this quote. And I think that this is a station we should all strive for, and that it is a process. And the way that we engage the world with our actions to bring about change will transform over time. And as we learn more and as we continue to give our witness to the world. So all of this, if you ask me, begins with accepting that we have a responsibility to bear witness to this world for what it really is. Taking what that witness teaches us and asking ourselves in a personal way, what does this really mean? This first quote is by Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, a man considered as the final prophet of God by Muslims. And the same line, just for context, and the same line of prophets of Jesus or Moses or Abraham, peace be upon them all. And what I have not included on this screen, and it's in especially regards to that quote, is that saying says that changing injustice with the heart is the weakest of faith. And I would say that it's the weakest of faith if you just stop there. I'm going to come back to that idea in just a minute. The second quote that you see is part of an answer that Malcolm X, an African-American civil rights leader, gave in an interview, asserting that African-Americans should pursue their freedom and rights by any means necessary. I actually want to take this idea of by any means necessary and consider it in light of what it takes to ask yourself the question that I mentioned earlier. What does this all mean? As we witness our world in its pains and in its unfairness and in its injustice, this subjects yourself to inner transformation in order to see the world for what it is can be a long and hard process. But I believe that we should engage it by any means, meaning that we should, and I speak first and foremost to myself here, overcome numbness and desensitization to the world by any means, overcome fear of the unknown and fear of the other by any means, overcome our own biases and hold us back from giving the best witness that we can by any means. The reason that I think that, according to the saying by Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, changing injustice only with the heart is considered the weakest of faith, is because by choosing to only stay there, to not go beyond to speaking and then to taking action, we choose to stay comfortable and avoid disrupting our own sense of the world, or our own sense of just stability of everything being just the way that it should be or the way that it is, just because it's easier. Going beyond to the tongue and to the actions requires us to engage our limitations internally relentlessly, and this is an essential process in discovering our potential and living in our potential to change the world that we're in. Finally, I want to come back to this idea. Not to come back to this idea, just come to this idea because I have not mentioned it yet. Why do we need to have hope in each other? Which is the last line that you see there. This is not a quote by anyone. This is just a question that I felt fit the theme of what we're talking about today. And it's a question that I actually ask myself really often. Why do we need to have hope in each other? Because hope needs to be what fuels us. It needs to be what it needs to be what we strive to create more of. And to do that, we need to keep learning about all the different ways that hope may look in our world. I know that in talking about the act of bearing witness to the world, I have meant mostly in regards to bearing witness to what is unfair, what is wrong, what is unjust. But I mean it equally with bearing witness to the beauty that is a part of our world, whether that's in our natural environment, or whether that's in people, or whether that is in the media, all of the variety of media that we have the opportunity to consume. And finally, perhaps you've noticed this as well, but I've definitely noticed this, is that this is also a very courageous act. It's not a fickle or weak act to seek beauty whilst also knowing and feeling that so much of the opposite exists is deeply intelligent, and it is us as human beings functioning at our best and most truthful. I tell myself regularly that change happens through human beings, just as a lot of injustice does happen through human beings. So if I want to see change take its natural course, then I must have hope in others. I've got to believe that it is possible for my own sake and for the sake of others. Because if I don't do that, then what becomes my compass? What becomes my fuel? On this point, I want to leave you with one example to really illustrate the power of having hope in each other, even if the world may suggest that there is no point in doing so. Malcolm X is one of the people in my life, especially when it comes to pursuing change and becoming the kind of person that you need to be in order to pursue that change, that I really look up to. So in the last, I'd say just the last couple of years of his life, he formed an organization called the Organization for African Unity. And his intent was to take the plight of African American people and generally African people across the world, on the continent and beyond, to the United Nations, because he believed that at that point, America didn't have the capacity to deal with the African American question. And I was reflecting on this a couple of months ago, and I realized what would it take someone to take a question before a body in a time where you knew that that body didn't really recognize you fully as a human being. You must have pushed yourself to have really radical hope in the capacity for the other to see your humanity. And in order to do that, he must have put himself in a situation or in a perspective where he saw nothing but the potential of their humanity. What I mean by this organization, the United Nations, not having the capacity to see perhaps Malcolm X or African Americans as human beings was in that time, just as is today, the United States government was a part of the Security Council of the United Nations, so a key decision maker in what the United Nations decided to do or not do. And at that point, just as Malcolm knew and was living his life advocating, the US government was not interested in giving rights to African American people or even considering them to be as equally human as themselves, or as white people were in America. So to know that he may not be given the full courtesy of his own humanity before the United Nations, but to pursue bringing this question before them, for me, it reflects what is possible when even when things may suggest otherwise, choosing to place hope in other human beings, choosing to see the capacity of other human beings to see your own humanity, it serves you. Before it does really anyone else. It allows you to take more radical action. It allows you to take more compassionate action. And then it absolutely serves other people. because you are saying, I see more in you than perhaps you even see in yourself. So I can't stress enough how important and valuable it is to not give up on believing that other people have the capacity to join us in the fight for justice. And even if we're not spending our time convincing them of how to do this and when to do this, and the fact that they should do this, which I don't think is necessary all the time. But I think just having that belief in our heart that in every person is the capacity to become better and to become committed to a fairer world is just really valuable. So I think I'm going to end there. I think I've just hit the 20-minute mark, which is pretty cool. So thank you so much for paying attention and for listening, and I'll hand it over back to Steph and Kalani.
Thank you so much for that. That was a lot of information. There was a lot to unpack, and it really opened my mind just on the different perspectives from around the world, and it's really amazing. Now, we've had tons of questions coming through the chat line, but first I'd like to ask one from myself. From that quote, you said people use their, you can see in America, people are using their tongues and action to protest what they believe is not right. So how do you think people should go about using their heart to challenge it? How do you think, because people can use their tongue and their actions, but it's hard to use their heart. So how do people go about that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Kalani. I think that even before we get to using our tongue to protest injustice, that it begins with understanding and correcting what it is in our heart. And for me, what that means is that knowing that the way that I see other people or know other people or see the world around me or understand the world around me is never really going to be fully perfect. It's a process of changing and expanding what is in my own heart before I take that to my tongue and I take that to my actions. So what it means for me, what it means in engaging, and I think what others can do in engaging the world or engaging in justice through our heart, is to know that reflection as you as an individual on what you believe in, on the way that you look at the world, and understanding what maybe you need to change before you go and you speak to other people, is, I think, the process of engaging the world through your heart, or injustice through your heart. And that can feel sometimes like not as an effective as a process, because it's not creating perhaps tangible change in the world around us, or it's not engaging other people, or it's not what other people can see. But I think it's what makes whatever you do with your tongue, whatever you do with your actions, most effective.
Yeah, that's really powerful. It's about looking internally before you voice your opinion, looking inside before you put out through your tongue and your actions. We've got a question coming in from the chat line from TDL, and that's: do you think consuming information through social media makes it harder or makes it easier to see the world for what it really is?
My friend, that is a beautiful question. I'm asking myself that question as well. I think that it needs to be a balance. I think social media, part of social media, let's just take Instagram, for example, is that you curate your own information, right? And that can be a very positive thing, but it can also kind of hold us back, because if you're only seeing what the people who agree with you are saying, or if you're only seeing the things you're interested in, it can limit the scope of your ability to really see the world in its diversity and for what it really is. So I think we all need to make an effort because social media is very powerful, and it's powerful because we have access to it literally at our fingertips and we're always on it. So I think that we need to make an effort in when we do curate our news feeds and choosing who we do follow, and going, it's valuable for me to hear the perspectives of people that don't look like me, or people who don't think like me, or people who have not studied what I've studied, or are not interested in what I'm interested in. That's one way of, I think, making sure that we're getting a diversity of information. The other thing is that what I noticed particularly about what happened, what was going on with the movement in Minnesota and generally across America after George Floyd's murder, and also previously, social media was a big tool that the protests in my country, the country of my birth, and where I just actually was less than 24 hours ago in Ethiopia. It was a really important tool in organizing the protests that led to the fall of the 25-year-old totalitarian government, a dictatorship in Ethiopia. It was through social media that we got information about what was happening, very specifically what was happening on the ground, and how other people on the ground use social media to communicate with each other as well, to organize on the ground. So I think, and when that was happening, it was also information overload, to the point where you can become really overwhelmed. Like, what do I now? I know so much. I think the natural process for a human being is, once I know, get a little bit of information, and you go and do something about it. But social media cranks that up to, like, before you can even decide or strategize, like, what action do you want to take, or reflect on the information you're getting, you've consumed so much information that it can paralyze you. So I think that you need to know for yourself how much is enough. And I think I mentioned in the talk that there is purpose in taking some breaks from consuming mass amounts of media and social media. So long as you come back, you're doing that with the intention to return to consuming this information with more openness and with more sincerity. So the answer to that question is that I really don't know for everyone how that works, but I think that, yes, social media is powerful, but it's up to us to make it as purposeful as possible by consuming a wide variety of information through it, and consuming it somewhat with pace.
Yeah, thanks for breaking that down for us, Soreti, and great question, Kaylani, especially for younger generation. We know that, I guess even for older generations, sometimes I experience this myself, that attention is becoming a really scarce commodity. Mm-hmm. So having the intention that you're going to, give yourself a break from it with coming back to be able to process it effectively, that was really great advice. I'm learning so much throughout this whole week, and this is the beautiful thing about this job, is that we're constantly learning and being able to hang out with people like yourself. I think some of the things that you mentioned in there were amazing, and I just want to repeat something that you said, that we all have a responsibility to bear witness to the world. I think that's an important note, because we can get our blinkers on and get caught up in everyday life, and if we don't acknowledge what's actually happening around us, then we can't be part of that change, even if we have the desire to create change. So that was a really great point. Just wanted to repeat that to give it some more emphasis for you.
Yeah, appreciate it.
And there's a common thread that's coming through this week as well about storytelling and the power that plays in creating change and changing people's perceptions of each other, just to get like a better understanding, and to humanize a person that you don't necessarily understand, that's being affected by things that are happening in the world. So really great to hang out with you today. I do have one question that I think would be relevant to some people that are tuning in, and some of the kids that we work with. One of the interviews I watched for you, I think it was actually an application video that you put on YouTube, and you mentioned about pain being linked to passion. And like, do you have any advice on how to get over that hurdle and lean into it? Because sometimes that pain, you start backing away. But if you want to, is that part of the healing process? And how do you get through that instead of backing away from it when you want to create change?
That's such a great question. I'm just trying to remember the application. I think, I think I know which one you're talking about. It's such an individual experience and such an individual process. And sometimes it can feel hard to make comment on this, because you just never know the degree of pain that someone is going through, the degree of trauma that they have experienced, that straight up asking someone to sort of lean into it can feel like kind of tone deaf sometimes. But I love your question, because it's so necessary to understanding that everything that has happened in your life is a part of you being able to activate your highest potential, and you being able to serve in the best way possible. From my experience, I would say that creating the space in your life, and knowing that it will take longer than, or knowing that it's going to happen in its own time. And it's not so much of a cognizant mental process. It's much more of like a heart-centered process, and something that like I can't say we'll be like, I'll start on Saturday and I'll finish next Saturday, and I'll get to a point where I can, like, it's gonna take time outside of your linear sense of time, and outside of your own expectations, but that it will happen. Like, you will go from a place of disempowerment in your pain to a place of empowerment in your pain, where it doesn't necessarily stop hurting you, but you just become much stronger in holding space for both the hurt and the power that comes from that experience that hurt you. So just to be really practical with what I'm saying, I think just if you can create a practice, if you don't already have one, or if you already have one, create a practice of cultivating silence in your life, away from, you know, all the thoughts you might have about the experience or about the pain, all the stories which are creating around it, just to be able to be honest, bear witness to it, to go back to, you know, the point of the talk and the point that you emphasized, Stephanie, to just be able to, as we're asking ourselves to bear witness to the world in its pain and its unfairness, to bear witness to what's inside of you and the pain or the unfairness that you've experienced. And I think that in itself, I think, like, the thing that I feel like we need to push past in being able to see that transformation is the idea that we have a massive amount of control over how that happens, over how the pain goes from just hurt to power. We kind of don't. We can only just give ourselves the time and the space to allow the process to take place naturally, and it will. Like, I can't emphasize, I don't know what that's based on, I can't give you any science behind that, but I know that it will take place naturally. I know that it's if anything has been given to you, there's I'm a Muslim, so I'll just use this quote from the Quran. There's a saying that says that you're not given anything that you cannot bear. Even if it feels like you cannot bear it, there's nothing in your life that you have gone through that you cannot change or that you cannot bear. So that would be my most practical advice, is just to give as much time and space as possible, and find a way to be with the pain in a way that isn't creating stories around it and emphasizing it and making it more the center of your life and the center of your experience. I hope that is a good answer.
Yeah, and I like during that interview as well that I watched, or your application, you also mentioned the role that meditation plays in your life. Does that help you find that space and I guess process some of the pain that's not going to impact you in a way that's really damaging?
Yeah, absolutely. I would not know where I would be in this life without meditation and without a practice of prayer. I would not have a clue. Let me say that. I would, yeah, absolutely. I think that the purpose of meditating and the purpose of a practice of prayer, which is really the same thing as meditation, is, I think, to be able to be more in that state of observation in every moment in our lives, not just when we're meditating or not just when we're in prayer. And the benefit of being in that state of observation is that we have more choice over the actions that we take and over the reactions that we have than when we are inside the experience of the pain or the trauma, and we can only really see through that pain and trauma. So it's really about giving yourself agency over your own life. When when you cultivate stillness and you can really watch the world around you, you can go, what do I really want to do? Not what am I motivated or pushed to do because I am in an experience of pain or because I am afraid, but going, I'm in an experience of pain, I am afraid, I don't know what to do, what's the answer? Having all these questions, but having the space in yourself to be able to go, but still, what's the best thing for me to do in this moment? I think that comes from meditation and that comes from prayer.
Yeah, I'm still trying to master the skill of it. So I've been doing, I guess, micro meditations.
Yeah.
And I really just want to thank you for joining us today. And I know that you probably had a massive 24 hours, considering that you've just been in Ethiopia 24 hours ago. So I hope that's given you some energy to keep moving forward. And we've definitely uncovered a few practical things that we can keep pushing out to the program days we're working with the kids that we work with. And thanks so much for your time.
You're most welcome. Thank you so much for having me, Stephanie. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Now I'm going to throw back to our host for today, Kaylani, to wrap it up. And I'm so proud of you, buddy, for taking the lead today and showing everyone what the kids in Australia here are capable of, and also kids around the world your age. So here's over to Kaylani for our wrap up.
Thank you so much. I've had to switch. It started raining outside, so I've had to come running inside in school here. Now, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on. I really do appreciate it. I've learned so much personally. I think the fact that it taught us to look internally before we look externally and voice our thoughts was something that was really passionate and something that I was really happy about. Now, I'd like to leave. First of all, I'd like to thank you so much, and I'd like to throw it out to the chat line to say what are your thoughts and what do you think and what did you learn. As well as that, I'd like to leave you with a Simon Sinek quote that made me rethink leadership and the role of being a leader, and I'll read that now. So there are those who lead and those who are leaders. Leaders have positions of authority or power, and those who lead inspire us, and we follow them not because we have to, but because we want to, and we follow them for us, not them. It's those that know why that have the ability to inspire those around them or to find others that inspire them. So go out and find why. I'll see you tomorrow. It's really impactful.